In this video, we will be covering the eraser brush. The eraser brush is pretty much straightforward. It's exactly the opposite of the paint tool or the paintbrush that we just covered in the previous video. And to showcase the abilities of the eraser, I'll go ahead and use the paintbrush here and just draw out a quick line. Now the eraser is right here, eraser brush or eraser tool, I should say. And just like the paintbrush, you'll just go ahead and left mouse click and swipe across whatever you want to erase. So it's pretty much straightforward tool. And you can control how much you erase by coming up to the top here in the eraser tool options bar, and you can raise and lower the opacity just like the paintbrush. And if you folks remember the paintbrush, the opacity for the paintbrush, if you lower the opacity, folks will get a lighter line when you paint out. And every time you paint over the same line, if the opacity is low, it's like putting on layers of the same color. Now, of course, at 100% opacity with the paintbrush, you can't paint layers like how you see here. The same thing goes for the eraser. At 100% opacity, you erase everything. But if you lower the opacity, I'm just going to lower mine to roughly about, let's go about 50%. And if you try to erase now, you get pretty much the same effect as lowering the opacity on the paintbrush tool. And every time you swipe over or erase over the same area, you take a little bit more off each time, rather than if it was at 100%, you'd erase it completely away. So you folks could think as the eraser as sort of like the opposite or the counter to the paintbrush, where the paintbrush will add at 100%, you'll get something like this, but at a lower opacity percentage, say about 50, you can add continuously over the same stroke to get a darker stroke every time. And with the eraser tool, you can take away from whatever the image or paint stroke is, and each time you do, it takes away just a little bit more. Okay, so that's what the eraser tool does as far as paint strokes go. Now what I'm going to show you folks is how it affects images. Okay, so I'm using the Photoshop class files here, and I'm just going to bring in the DC picture and open up a new tab right here for the DC picture. Once again, if you want to open up a new image in a different tab from whatever tab you already have open, you just drag a image into this bar space right here and release, and it should open up another image. But in order to do the eraser for this, I'm going to need a second picture. So I'll pull in the poppy picture, the flower picture, and I'm going to resize it so that it fills up the same area as the DC picture. Now, what I'm going to do quickly here, and as I said before, you folks will understand this more when I explain the layer system, which will be in the next few videos from now. going to convert this into a, actually I'm going to rasterize the layer. If I didn't rasterize the layer, I would not be able to edit anything on the layer, and I'll explain that once we cover layers in a layer video. So I have my eraser tool active, and just like the paintbrush tool, you can make the eraser tool bigger or smaller using the open bracket keys next to the P key. Left bracket makes your paint or eraser smaller. The right bracket key makes your eraser larger. And of course, you have the opacity up here. So we're going to start off with 100 opacity, which means I'll erase everything off of this flower layer. See, so we have the DC layer underneath, and we have the flower layer on top. And when I erase away, or left mouse click to erase, you notice that the bottom layer, which is the DC picture, will show through. Okay, so that's at 100% opacity on the eraser tool. Now if I lower the opacity down to 50% or any percentage lower than 100, then we'll only erase a portion of the image. So let me try right here. As you can see, we're starting to be able to see the capital in the back because we erased or took away about 50% of the pixels in the flower or poppy picture. If I go over the same area again, you notice it becomes more prevalent, the DC picture in the back. You still can see some remnants of the poppy picture. And if I do it once more over the same spot, it all but erases away the picture. You still see, I'm not sure if you folks will be able to see it on the YouTube video, but there's some faint lines of the poppy picture here. But if you keep going over the same spot, you completely erase it. Okay, so the eraser tool is very useful when you want to do a gradual fade, I guess you could say, from one picture to the next. And this will be a good technique to use when you folks are trying to superimpose the image of someone's face onto another picture of someone else's body. And I'll show you folks that technique yet in another video way after, once all the tools and actions are done for the eraser tool, or I'm sorry, for all of the tools of Photoshop. I'll show you folks some advanced techniques of how to blend images together using the eraser tool. And if you folks remember the videos with the selection tools, you folks can use a combination of tools to achieve a certain look or achieve some kind of action that you folks wanted to do. For example, if you folks remember any of the selection tools actually, but I'm going to use the rectangle marquee tool to section off a spot. Let me restart here. Just went back in history in my history tab, all the way almost to the beginning, if you folks were wondering. I'm going to draw out a rectangle here around the middle of the flower. And if you remember in the video about the marquee tool, whatever is on the inside of the tool, unless you right click and select inverse, whatever is on the inside of the tool or the marked off area will be affected. So if you combine the marquee tool with the eraser tool, then you can do a very clean eraser, or you know, erasing of whatever's in your drawn out selection area. Let me go back to that and up this to 100%. But remember, after drawing out your selection with the marquee tool, and you got the dancing ants lines here, remember you have to switch back to your eraser tool. Then once you go over whatever's on the inside, I'm holding down the left mouse button and I'm just swiping my mouse back and forth. You can do a pretty clean erasure of whatever's on the inside. Now I'm going to hit Command Z, Control Z for you guys on the window. And this time I'm going to select the inverse, or the outside. But before I do that, remember you have to jump back to one of the selection tools. Now it doesn't have to be the marquee select tool. As long as you have the selection lines up, these moving lines, you folks can jump to any of the selection tools and right click and select the inverse. Okay, so now we got this portion selected and the inside is deselected. So if we go back to our eraser tool, now of course everything but the inverse is selected and you can edit it. If I wanted to, I could go and erase pretty much the entire picture. And to make things even faster, instead of using eraser only this big, which is 250 pixels, I could just click here and raise it up so that, well, you see how it's so big that we don't have the edge lines for the eraser. So you can make your eraser very, very large really quickly, and you can erase large portions very quickly that way. Okay, so just like with the brush tool, you can control the hardness. If I lower the hardness of the brush down to 0, and let's lower the size back down as well. Okay, this is a good size. Now if you start to brush, you notice the edges are softer as I erase. And this is the technique that I'm going to show you folks when you're blending of somebody else's face onto a body. You want a soft edge. Now if I have the hardness all the way up to 100, you see how sharp the eraser edge is compared to the hardness of the eraser brush when it's set to 0. This is at 100% down here, and over here is 0%. So by messing with the settings, the hardness as well as the brush size and the opacity, you folks can achieve a wide variety of results depending on what your folks' goal is in terms of blending pictures or editing pictures, erasing pictures. Messing with the settings will give you varied effects, as you can see right here. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the brush tools. Not much to show you. I'm not really going to show you folks these other items. For what you folks need to do your Photoshop poster, as well as pretty much almost any type of editing you're going to do in Photoshop for your images, all you folks need to know as far as the eraser goes is how to set the size, the hardness, and the opacity. And that'll pretty much cover most of what you do in Photoshop as far as the eraser is concerned.